Egypt has warned against Israel's plan to target Rafah. Gaza's southern city is along Egypt's border, and satellite photos are revealing how Cairo is now building more checkpoints. In November, construction crews began working on a raised strip of land 200 metres from the fence which divides Egypt from the Gaza Strip. That land barrier has now grown to 14 kilometres in length. The Egyptians are also building a new concrete wall along the old border wall. Israel's advance to the south of Gaza is raising tension with Egypt. The two countries signed a formal peace treaty in 1979 based on what's called the Camp David Accords. It lays out a complicated set of agreements about land and borders. Importantly, it limits the presence of Egypt's military in the Sinai Peninsula. A separate agreement was signed in 2005 after Israeli soldiers and settlers withdrew from the Gaza Strip, known as the Philadelphia Accord. It covered how the Rafah border crossing was to be run, as well as how Egypt could deploy guards along the border. But Israel is now talking about relocating huge numbers of Palestinians away from Rafah. Egypt has reportedly warned that any attempt to move people across the border could lead to the termination of the treaty and the other agreements between the two countries. Jazeera's Marwan Bishara is here in the studio. Marwan, if the situation in Rafah worsens, does Israel seriously think it is still possible to be able to push Gazans across the border, considering what we're seeing by way of Egypt's reinforcements on that border?
It seems like it, it seems like it. But basically the Netanyahu government, or Netanyahu himself, has been preaching for a good while now, is that every time you tell me I can't do something, I do it and nothing happens. This is something like what Trump used to say. I recognize Jerusalem, and you say something will happen, nothing happens. I recognize the Golan Heights as Israeli territory, nothing happens. Netanyahu says, you warned me not to invade by land. I did, nothing happened. The world, some criticized, some didn't. Mostly those who I need, meaning Western powers, have been so hypocritical, have been so appeasing to the Israeli government. So basically, Netanyahu's appetite has grown with more killing, more expansion, more war crimes, because he keeps doing it with impunity. And now he thinks, now that he's coming to the tip of the southern part of Gaza, the Egyptians are warning, the Americans are concerned, the French are worried, and he's probably laughing. Yeah, I've heard that before. What do I care what you keep saying? Because you actually never walk your talk.
Yeah, there appear to be a lot of nervous hand-wringing moments, particularly from Emmanuel Macron, who has raised deep concerns about what all of this means. I mean, if you could put this into a historical context for us, what would it mean? What does it mean for us now to be talking about potentially the collapse of the Camp David Accords?
I think for the time being, this is a warning. This is not a real threat that is going to be actionable anytime soon. Among the other rewards for the Camp David Accords, Egypt has gotten tens of billions of dollars from the United States, and it continues to get aid from the United States. It continues to be also dependent on the United States for various helps. So Egypt has been a bit of an asset for the United States. It's dependent on the United States. And I personally don't foresee Israel walking away from the Camp David Accords. But even if it does, that doesn't mean that we're going to go back to the state of war between Egypt and Israel. Certainly not under Sisi, certainly under not this regime that's basically been even profiting from the war in Gaza with all these, corruption on the borders. 5,000 to 10,000 per individual to leave Gaza and all of that. So I think for the time being, what the Egyptian regime insists on is that he's been helpful. He's been quiet as genocide was unraveling in plain sight in Gaza. So he just doesn't want any future resolution of the Palestinian issue to be resolved at the expense of the Egyptian security. That's what he's saying. He's basically begging the Israelis, just don't push the Palestinians my way. They're not my problem. They're your problem, right? And he's actually helping out with the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority. They're all coming together to try to help Netanyahu. Imagine, after Netanyahu carries all his war crimes, now the Arabs and the Americans want to help him out deal with the day after.
When Netanyahu, and we've obviously heard him quite a lot today, speaking on 2 US networks, and also in recent days addressing members of his own government, when he talks about, quote, total victory in Gaza, who is he speaking to?
Both to his public opinion and to those detractors who are basically warning him that you are far off. Yeah, if you remember just a couple of days ago, as he was saying to his own crowd, his own media, he was saying, we've destroyed 2/3 of Hamas's forces. The next day, American intelligence told Congress that he only destroyed at best 1/3 of Hamas forces. He was saying that we're going to continue with the war until we free the captives. The next day, the Biden administration came out and said, that's just humbug. It's not going to happen. The only way to free the captives is through diplomacy. War is going to kill them, right? He went on and said, we're going to maintain security over Gaza for the foreseeable future, as well, of course, the West Bank and everything west of the Jordan River. The Obama administration said no, 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 no. So this has been one humiliation after another of the Biden administration on the part of the Netanyahu government.
What do we make of Rafah as an entire strategy? Because how Netanyahu plays this could have massive long-term implications on what happens next. Hamas have said if this assault, this ground invasion of assault happens, there'll be no captive exchange, end to negotiations. How seriously is Netanyahu taking that? Does it bother him?
Oh, I think I would think he's probably happy about it. You know, when someone has a certain megalomania and certain worldview, and according to him, in his book, Bibi, he's very hyper-realistic, and he only thinks in terms of power. He doesn't think in terms of values. And he thinks the value of few Israelis, nothing compared with Israel's national security or the value of Israel's national security. And he believes he is the guardian to Israel's national security. Not the occupation, not the genocide, not, of all of that. Now, he thinks that he's defending Israel's expansion into the historic Palestine. And if 100 or so captives are going to be in the way, well, let them be killed, because that will liberate him from the pressures of the Biden administration, from the pressures of the day after, and from the pressures of the public opinion or segments of the public opinion at home, in order for him to do whatever he wants to do in Gaza, including the ethnic cleansing we just talked about, and including the increase of settlements that we just talked about in the West Bank and maybe tomorrow in Gaza. Already much of his own fascist, fanatic government is talking about resettling Gaza, believe it or not.
Marwan, many thanks as always. Marwan Bishara there.